A few weeks ago, I was sitting in a small, impeccably clean cafe in Seoul, watching an elderly woman struggle to navigate a new digital kiosk to order her tea. It was a scene of perfect, quiet domesticity, the kind of civilizational fortress stability that Japan and South Korea have spent 80 years perfecting. To her, and to most people in the room, the idea of peace wasn't a policy. It was the baseline of reality. It was free. But as I looked at the news ticker scrolling across the bottom of a wall-mounted TV, the mood in the room felt jarringly out of sync. The headline wasn't about the economy or the aging population. It was about the 5% defense mandate. For a region that has long enjoyed a subsidized existence under the American security umbrella, that number represents something much more violent than a budget hike. It's a form of strategic extortion, a sudden, brutal repricing of survival in a world where the old treaties have finally expired. The most unsettling part, though, wasn't the cost. It was the way the conversation shifted when a group of graduate students at the next table started talking. They weren't debating the ethics of pacifism or the legacy of the 20th century. They were discussing nuclear latency with the same detached pragmatism you'd use to talk about a software update. They spoke about their country's massive stockpiles of fissile material and advanced rocket programs, not as taboos, but as defensive sovereignty held in reserve. That instantaneous pivot from a society defined by its atomic allergy to one conducting a cold-eyed calculation of when to finally assemble the pieces of a bomb is the real story of 2026. It's the moment the umbrella finally punctured, leaving two of the world's most advanced welfare states standing in the rain, realizing that their peaceful simulation civilizations are about to be hit with a bill they might not be able to pay without losing their souls. That scene in the cafe, it really stuck with me. This feeling that the old world, the guarantee of safety we all kind of took for granted.
It's gone.
It's just evaporated. And so today, what we're talking about isn't just policy. It feels like a brutal repricing of reality itself.
Repricing is exactly the right word. For, 70, 80 years, East Asia has run on a model of, let's call it, cheap security. Right. The United States provided the umbrella, right? And Japan and South Korea, they got to focus on building these incredible, prosperous, safe societies, these civilizational fortresses you mentioned.
Yeah.
But everything we're seeing now, every document, every budget line points to a single conclusion. The subscription model has changed.
And the price has gone up. A lot.
Dramatically. We are shifting from a subsidized existence to, a pay-to-survive model.
Wow.
The central theme of our deep dive today is that Japan and South Korea are being forced to pay for their own survival. And the currency isn't just yen or won, it's their social fabric, their entire identity.
So that's our mission today. We want to really unpack this 5% defense mandate, this new idea of nuclear realism, and I think most importantly, the human cost of turning a welfare state into what you could call a garrison state.
Let's get into it.
Okay, so part one, the fiscal shock. To really understand the money, I think we have to understand the people who manage it. And we have this really incredible narrative insight, this story of a senior official, let's call him Sato, inside the Japanese Ministry of Finance.
And that's crucial. The Ministry of Finance, the Okurasho, it's the absolute heart of the Japanese state. These people aren't just accountants. They are the gatekeepers.
The ones who keep the lights on.
They literally decide the nation's destiny with spreadsheets.
Exactly. So in the quiet, almost sacred halls of the Ministry of Finance, I heard this story about Sato. He spent 30 years, his entire career, perfecting the national balance sheet. For most of that time, his job was predictable. It was about managing the silver democracy.
Supporting Japan's aging population, which is a huge task in itself, the oldest population on Earth.
A monumental task. But recently, the entire mission has changed. You have to picture him late at night, staring at these spreadsheets where the lines for geriatric health care, for pension subsidies, are just being sliced. He's trying to find money to meet this new 5% GDP defense mandate, and it's just not there.
It's a zero-sum game.
It's cold fiscal arithmetic.
Yeah.
And I heard about one specific, very tense meeting. He had to explain to a representative from a pensioners association, these are the very people he spent his life's work trying to protect, why their community care center was being reprioritized.
Reprioritized, the classic bureaucratic euphemism.
It means canceled. He told them the funds were needed for, and this is the, quote, long-range standoff capabilities.
Goals.
He had to tell a group of retirees that their health care was being traded for Tomahawk missiles. And the story goes that the most painful part wasn't anger. It was just silence. This man represents a generation of bureaucrats who truly believed in Japan's post-war identity of peace and social welfare.
And now he's dismantling it.
He's being forced to become an architect of a garrison state.
Yeah.
It's the social contract being rewritten in real time as a security contract.
Yeah.
You can understand the fear, the strategic necessity, but you also have to feel that profound sense of loss for people who see their lifelong contributions being traded for steel and gunpowder.
That phrase, trading lifelong contributions for steel and gunpowder, it's incredibly powerful. And it's exactly what's happening. But let's dig into the math, because the cold fiscal arithmetic is even colder than it sounds.
Break it down for us. Why is 5% such a shock? It might not sound like a huge number to everyone.
Right, you hear 5%, and you think, well, the U.S. spends around 3.5%, Israel spends close to 5%. But for Japan, this is a political and cultural earthquake. You have to understand the history of the 1% ceiling.
That was almost like a religion, wasn't it? The 1% cap.
It was a sacred, unwritten rule, a core part of their post-war identity. Defense spending does not cross 1% of GDP, period. It was a symbol, we don't do war anymore.
And then Kishida pushed it to 2%.
Which was already seen as a revolution, a breaking of the ultimate taboo. That was supposed to happen by 2027. But now, in 2026, under pressure from a potential Trump 2.0 administration and just the raw reality of the region, the demand is 5%.
That's a war-footing level of spending for a country not at war.
Exactly. But here's the detail that makes it so much worse. The thing that's really keeping Sato up at night, it's not just the percentage, it's the currency. We have to talk about imported inflation on defense.
The yen. I saw that in the notes. It's in free fall.
Free fall is a gentle way to put it.
Yeah.
The yen is at lows we haven't seen since the 1980s. Now, why does that matter for buying a missile?
Because they buy them from the U.S.
A huge amount of their high-end gear. Tomahawks, F-35 fighter jet parts, the sophisticated software that runs it all, it's all bought from American companies. And they demand payment in U.S. dollars.
So as the yen's value plummets,
their buying power just evaporates. It's like trying to fill a bucket with a hole in it. They have to spend billions and billions more yen just to buy the exact same number of missiles they budgeted for a few years ago.
So a huge slice of that new 5% isn't even for more security. It's just to cover the terrible exchange rate.
You're running up a down escalator, you're burning cash just to stand still, and you're doing all this while carrying a backpack full of lead. We can't forget the debt.
Japan's national debt.
It's over 263% of their GDP. It's the highest in the entire developed world. They are completely maxed out. So they have this crushing debt. They have the silver democracy to pay for. And now they have to find 5% of their entire economy for weapons they have to buy with a currency that's collapsing.
Something has to break.
And that something is the social safety net. It's the community care center Sato had to cut. That's not an anomaly, that's the new reality. Every new missile defense system is a hospital wing that doesn't get built.
And we're seeing this exact same squeeze in South Korea, right? It's not just a Japan story.
Absolutely not. The mechanics are a little different, but the pain is the same. The internal documents from the RK Ministry of Economy and Finance, they talk about a major policy shift. They're moving away from expansionary fiscal policy, which is what they've used for years to juice the economy.
And moving toward what?
Fiscal soundness.
Which sounds nice and responsible, but it's code, isn't it?
It's code for austerity. It's code for cuts. The ministry's own papers talk about freezing or cutting funds for public administration, for local governments. They are squeezing the civil sector dry to pour money into the defense budget.
And how much money are we talking about?
The increase is 7.9 trillion won, specifically for what they call advanced military capabilities.
And what does that buy you for 7.9 trillion won?
It buys you a state-of-the-art surveillance and strike system. They're building out their 3 pillars defense. This means early warning nanosatellites to spot a North Korean launch the instant it happens. It means major upgrades for their F-15K fighter jets. It means a very, very expensive high-tech shield.
So if you're a mayor in a small town in South Korea, you're watching your budget for schools and roads get slashed so that Seoul can put more satellites in space.
That is the direct trade-off. This is what we are calling security inflation. The price of peace has just gone through the roof. For decades, that civilizational fortress was a heavily subsidized product, paid for in large part by the American taxpayer.
And now the subsidy is gone.
Or it's being renegotiated on much harsher terms, and the people in Japan and Korea are getting the bill. And it's a bill that could bankrupt the very societies they're trying to protect.
Which leads us to the really big question. Why now? Why is this all happening in 2026? Why this sudden demand for 5%? This takes us to part 2, the geopolitical pivot.
To get the why, you have to read the 2026 U.S. National Defense Strategy. It lays out a fundamental change in how America sees its role in the Pacific.
I've heard the old model described as hub and spoke. The U.S. is the hub, allies are the spokes. Is that what's changing?
That's exactly it. For 70 years, it was a bicycle wheel. The U.S. was the hub, Japan was a spoke, South Korea was another spoke, the Philippines, Australia, all spokes. But what's the key feature of a bicycle wheel?
The spokes don't touch each other.
They only connect to the hub. The U.S. had separate bilateral relationships with everyone. Japan talked to the U.S., Korea talked to the U.S., but Tokyo and Seoul, militarily, they barely spoke. It was a top-down hierarchical system.
And the 2026 strategy throws that out.
Throws it right out the window. They are moving to what they call a lattice-like architecture.
A lattice-like for climbing roses.
Think less garden trellis and more chainmail armor. Or a mesh network. In a lattice, every single node connects to every other node.
So it's not just U.S. to Japan anymore. It's Japan to South Korea, Korea to the Philippines, Philippines to Australia.
Everyone connected to everyone. The goal is a concept they call integrated deterrence.
That sounds like a classic Pentagon buzzword. What does integrated deterrence actually mean if a crisis hits?
It means denial defense. The strategy is to turn the first island chain, that string of islands from Japan down through Taiwan to the Philippines that boxes in China, into an impenetrable wall.
A digital fortress.
So if China, for instance, tries to move its navy out into the Pacific, it's not just facing the U.S. 7th Fleet. It's facing a seamless web of sensors, drones, and missiles from 5 or 6 different allied nations, all sharing data in real time.
And the U.S. documents talk about achieving a decent peace.
It's a fascinating phrase, isn't it? It implies a peace based on a stable balance of power. But here's the crucial part, the part that explains the 5% mandate. To achieve this decent peace, the U.S. says its allies must possess devastating strike capabilities.
Wait, devastating strike? That doesn't sound very defensive. Japan has a pacifist constitution. They're supposed to be the shield, not the sword.
And that is the pivot. That's the revolution. The U.S. is explicitly telling Japan and South Korea, we can't be the only ones with swords anymore. You need to be able to strike back hard. It's no longer enough for the Japan self-defense forces to just defend the home islands. They need the ability to hit targets deep inside enemy territory.
That is a 180-degree turn from their entire post-war history.
It's a complete rewriting of the rules. So that's the view from Washington and its allies. It's burden sharing, it's integration, it's building a stronger wall to keep the peace.
Okay, but let's flip the map. What does this lattice look like? If you're sitting in Beijing, reading analysis from the Shanghai Institutes for International Studies, it doesn't look like chainmail. It looks like a cage.
And this is where we have to engage with the counter-argument, what the CISO's report calls the war incubation theory.
War incubation.
Their argument is that this isn't about maintaining peace at all. It's about provoking a conflict. They see it through the lens of the classic security dilemma.
The idea that my defensive moves look offensive to you.
It's the ultimate trap. I build a higher fence because I'm scared. You see my fence and think I'm planning something, so you buy a bigger dog. I see your dog, so I buy a gun.
And suddenly we're in an arms race neither of us wanted.
The CISO's report describes what they call a double arc of containment. They see 2 nooses tightening around China.
A double arc.
The first arc is in Northeast Asia, Japan and South Korea, forming a tight military bloc to contain China, Russia, and North Korea. The second arc extends down into Southeast Asia, with the U.S. strengthening alliances to limit China's influence there.
So from their perspective, this isn't a defensive lattice. It's an Asian NATO designed to encircle and suppress them.
That's the exact phrase they use, the NATOization of Asia. So you have these 2 completely irreconcilable views. One side says, we're sharing the burden for our collective survival. The other side says, you're building an exclusive bloc to start a war.
And the tragedy is, both sides probably believe they're right.
And they both might be. That's what makes it so dangerous. You're not just fighting a war, you're creating the perfect conditions for one to hatch on its own.
And the people caught in this incubator are the citizens of Japan and South Korea. Which brings us to the most sensitive part of this whole discussion. If the American umbrella is getting tattered and the price is going up, maybe it's time to build your own.
This is part 3, the nuclear awakening. And it is, without a doubt, the biggest psychological shift happening in the region, the breaking of the ultimate taboo.
We have another one of these narrative insights here, a story about a young policy analyst in Seoul. Let's call her Minji. Her story just perfectly captures the tension of this moment.
The gap between the public statement and the private reality.
Exactly. The world of strategic ambiguity. So this story I heard is about Minji, a sharp, young analyst at the Ministry of Economy and Finance in Seoul. Her job is to operate in that gray space where public statements are just shadows of the truth.
A very stressful job.
Incredibly, a huge part of her portfolio is managing the rising tide of what they're calling nuclear realism, especially among the younger generation. These are people who grew up with North Korean missile tests as background noise. They feel the American security guarantee is conditional at best.
They don't have the same historical memory or allergy to the topic. To them, it's just a strategic calculation.
It's pure pragmatism. So Minji spends her days drafting these incredibly nuanced memos. The language has to be just right. On one hand, it has to calm the nationalist fervor for going nuclear right now. On the other, it has to quietly lay the institutional groundwork for what they call technological latency.
Keeping the option open without saying you're keeping it open.
Right. And you could just feel the mental toll. She's balancing the fiery, almost desperate demands of a public that feels cornered against the very real constraints of what she calls limited sovereignty. She knows that one wrong step, one leaked memo, could trigger a crisis with Washington.
She's the gatekeeper of a national secret that isn't really a secret.
It's that South Korea is inching towards strategic autonomy, but it can't ever admit it. It's this high-stakes poker game played with diplomatic cables. And you have to understand, this nationalist push, it's not just aggression, it's a response to a deep-seated fear of abandonment. Minji is trying to keep that fear from boiling over into a conflict.
Her story is a perfect illustration of nuclear latency, but we should probably define that term because it's specific.
Yeah, let's break that down. What is latency, really?
Building a nuclear weapon requires three basic things. One, you need the fuel, the fissile material. That's your highly enriched uranium.
Okay.
Two, you need the technology to make it go boom. The complex engineering, the precision detonators. Three, you need a way to deliver it. A missile, basically.
Fuel, tech, and a delivery system.
Right. Now look at Japan and South Korea. Do they have delivery systems? Absolutely. World-class rocket programs. Do they have the tech? Yes. Some of the most advanced precision engineering on the planet.
So it really comes down to the fuel.
It comes down to the fuel. And that's the latent part. They both have huge civilian nuclear power industries. Japan has a massive stockpile of separated plutonium from its reprocessing program. South Korea has the technology to enrich uranium if it chose to. They are what we call virtual nuclear states.
Meaning they're just one decision away.
They are a screwdriver's turn away. They have all the components sitting in different boxes. Latency is the official policy of not turning that final screw, of staying just weeks or months from a functional bomb, but never taking that final step.
So why is the pressure to turn that screw building now? Why is Minji dealing with this nuclear realism?
In a word, abandonment. The Trump factor is huge here. Whether he's in office or not, the idea that the U.S. alliance is purely transactional is now deeply embedded in the thinking in both Tokyo and Seoul.
The fear that a future U.S. president could just decide one morning that defending Seoul isn't worth the risk to San Francisco.
Exactly. And the U.S. has sent signals. You mentioned the missile guidelines for South Korea. For years, the U.S. put strict limits on the range and payload of South Korean missiles. Right.
And then, a few years ago, they lifted all of them, just gone. The subtext of that move was clear. We might not always be here to shoot for you, so you better get your own arsenal in order.
That's a chilling message from your main ally.
It's what drives the push for defensive sovereignty. The students in that cafe you saw, they don't see nuclear weapons as a tool of aggression. They see it as the one insurance policy that can't be canceled by a tweet. It's not a moral taboo anymore. It's a cold, calculated software update for national survival.
But they can't just come out and declare it.
No, because the economic and diplomatic fallout would be catastrophic. Sanctions, isolation. That's why the U.S. is pushing things like the Camp David principles and the Washington Declaration. They're trying to institutionalize the alliance, to weave it so tightly that South Korea feels secure enough not to need its own bomb.
But the atomic allergy, as you called it, especially in Japan, it's fading.
It's being overwhelmed by a much more primal fear, the instinct for survival. Okay, so the budgets are being shredded, the geopolitics are shifting, the nuclear option is on the table, but all of this hardware, the missiles, the satellites, the ships, it has to be built. And that takes us to part 4, the industrial pivot.
And this is where the 5% mandate stops being just a burden and starts looking like something else entirely. We're seeing the emergence of what you could call fortress technology.
Let's bring in our third narrative here. This is the view from the factory floor. A story about an engineer, Kenji, in a place like Nagoya.
This is where the abstract policy meets concrete and steel.
Right. So there's this story making the rounds in the big industrial centers about the engineers of massive conglomerates like Mitsubishi or Hanwha. I heard about one, Kenji. He's an aerospace engineer. He spent 20 years of his life working on civilian projects, commercial jets, satellites for weather forecasting, peaceful, productive work.
The peace dividend in action.
Exactly. But recently, his entire department was rebranded. Suddenly, it's flooded with state-backed dual-use funding. You have to imagine this factory floor where the same machines, the same expertise that was used to build a commercial satellite component is now being repurposed. It's being used for guidance systems for what the documents call rapid breakout defense capability.
A very specific term.
It's a quiet but total mobilization. And the fascinating thing I heard is that for engineers like Kenji, this 5% mandate isn't seen as a burden. They see it as the ultimate industrial policy.
A massive state-funded R&D project.
It's a guarantee that their companies and their country will stay on the absolute bleeding edge of technology. It's a pivot from the peace dividend to fortress technology. The line between a civilian factory and a strategic arsenal has basically disappeared. Innovation and survival have become the same thing.
That phrase, innovation and survival, have become the same thing. That is the absolute core of this industrial pivot. And Kenji's story shows how this 5% mandate is, in effect, a massive stimulus package disguised as defense spending. But the real linchpin of this whole industrial strategy isn't aerospace. It's something much older. It's shipbuilding.
Shipbuilding, that seems so 20th century. Why is that the key to this high-tech alliance?
Because the numbers are staggering. The data is clear. Right now, China controls over 50% of the entire global shipbuilding market. 50%. They can produce warships at a rate the world has never seen.
And the United States.
Less than 1%.
Wait, less than 1%. How is that even possible for a global naval power?
It's the result of decades of deindustrialization. The U.S. naval industrial base has, for all practical purposes, withered away. They don't have enough shipyards, not enough dry docks, not enough skilled workers.
So if a U.S. aircraft carrier gets damaged in a conflict?
It could be out of action for years, literally waiting in line for repairs. But who are the number 2 and number 3 shipbuilders in the world, right behind China?
Japan and South Korea.
Exactly. So the U.S. strategy is what they call friendshoring. They are fundamentally reliant on Japanese and Korean shipyards to build and maintain the U.S. Navy.
So it's not just about them building up their own navies, it's about them propping up America's.
It's the very foundation of the new industrial alliance. And we see it in action with specific deals, like the Hanwha Ocean deal.
Right, I read about that. Hanwha is a huge South Korean company.
A defense giant. They recently acquired the Philadelphia shipyard in the U.S., and more importantly, they signed a master ship repair agreement, an MSRA, directly with the U.S. Navy.
So a South Korean company is now repairing American warships in an American port.
Yes. This is the integration in practice. It's a win-win. Hanwha gets access to the massive, incredibly lucrative U.S. naval maintenance repair and overhaul market. The U.S. Navy gets its ships fixed faster, its economic necessity meeting military reality.
And where does Japan fit into this?
Japan is all in on the high-tech autonomous side of things. Their defense buildup program is heavily focused on unmanned systems. You have to remember Japan's demographic problem.
A shrinking population. They can't find enough young people to be sailors.
So they're building robot ships, drone submarines, autonomous patrol vessels, the kind of guidance systems that Kenji, the engineer in your story, is probably working on. They're trying to build a navy that doesn't need sailors.
Automating the front lines.
It's the only way you can maintain a civilizational fortress when you don't have enough people to stand on the walls.
This is all starting to form a pretty clear picture. We've got the money, the geopolitical strategy, the nuclear latency, the industrial pivot. Let's make it concrete. What does this look like in practice, out on the water? This is part 5, operationalizing the alliance.
If you were on a ship in the East China Sea today, in 2026, you would see an exercise called Freedom Edge.
Freedom.
This isn't your old school naval drill. In the past, exercises were siloed. The Navy did Navy stuff, the Air Force did Air Force stuff. Freedom Edge is everything, everywhere, all at once. Air, sea, land, cyber, space.
And it's the U.S., Japan, and South Korea all operating together.
All operating as one. But the real change isn't the ships you can see, it's the data you can't. The key phrase from the joint documents is real-time integration.
What does that mean in practical terms?
It means the era of separate systems is over. If a Japanese destroyer's radar detects a missile launch from North Korea, that data isn't sent to a command center in Tokyo to be analyzed and then maybe shared with Seoul.
No.
It appears instantly on the screen of a South Korean Aegis cruiser and on the tablet of a U.S. commander in Hawaii. There is zero lag. It is a single, fused, trinational nervous system.
That's the lattice in action.
That is the lattice. And to protect this nervous system, they've created something called the DTPN, the Disruptive Technology Protection Network.
A firewall for the alliance.
A technological fortress. The U.S., Japan, and South Korea are collaborating on the next generation of warfare technology: AI, quantum computing, cyber weapons. The DTPN is designed to do two things. First, prevent any of that tech from leaking to China or North Korea.
And second,
Set the global standards. If you're not inside the DTPN, you're effectively locked out of the next generation of military tech. You're creating an exclusive high-tech bloc.
this all sounds incredibly integrated, almost permanent. But politics is messy. Governments change. A new leader could come in and say, I'm not playing this game. Can this all be undone?
That's the key question. And the architects of this system, the people who drafted the Camp David principles, they designed it with one word in mind: irreversible.
How can you make a political alliance irreversible?
You embed it so deeply in the bureaucracy and the industrial base that it becomes impossible to untangle. They created a permanent trilateral secretariat.
And a permanent office.
A permanent body staffed by officials from all three countries whose entire job is to coordinate and implement these agreements. It's designed to function no matter who is president or prime minister. So even with political chaos like President Yoon's impeachment in Korea or constant leadership changes in Japan's LDP, the machine keeps running. The bureaucratic and military inertia just carries it forward.
So even if a politician wants to hit the brakes, the train has already left the station.
The contracts are signed, the supply chains are integrated, the radar networks are fused, the engineers are collaborating. To pull it apart now would cause a level of economic and security disruption that no rational leader would risk. The lattice has been welded together.
That's a sobering thought. This has been a heavy deep dive. We've gone from a quiet cafe to the edge of a new global reality. Let's try to wrap this up in our outro.
Yeah, let's recap the journey.
We started with that elderly woman in Seoul and the sudden brutal realization that the price of her quiet cup of tea just went up astronomically. We saw Sato, the bureaucrat, forced to sacrifice social welfare on the altar of the 5% mandate.
We charted the geopolitical shift from the old, simple hub-and-spoke model to this new, complex lattice, a strategy of integrated deterrence that, to its rivals, looks an awful lot like war incubation.
We met Minji, the young analyst in Seoul, navigating the anxieties of a generation that sees nuclear weapons not as a taboo, but as a tool for survival. And then we saw Kenji, the engineer, whose factory floor has become the new front line, turning the tools of prosperity into the arsenal of deterrence.
That punctured umbrella you described in the opening, it didn't just leave them standing in the rain, it forced them to start building their own roof. But that roof is made of steel, and it's incredibly heavy.
It is, and it blocks out the sun. Which brings me to one final thought to leave you with. We tend to think about alliances in soft terms: friendships, treaties, shared values. But what we're witnessing in 2026, I think, is something different. It's the industrialization of paranoia. Japan and South Korea are no longer just allies to be protected. They are being hardwired into a single, massive machine of deterrence. They're welding their economies, their industries, and even their social contracts to this American-led lattice. And so the real question isn't whether this machine will succeed in keeping the peace. The question is, having turned their entire societies into gears for this machine, will they ever be able to turn it off?